The great hall of the Vraxian Imperial Palace glowed with purple light from 1,000 floating crystals. Queen Zaraketh stood at the center of the massive chamber, her violet scales catching the light like polished armor. She was nearly 7 feet tall, with golden eyes that had witnessed countless battles. Today those eyes showed no emotion as she prepared for her wedding. Around her, the Vraxian nobles whispered among themselves. Their reptilian faces showed amusement and confusion. Their queen, the strongest warrior in 5-star systems, was marrying a human, a species most of the galaxy considered soft and weak. Zaraketh knew what they were thinking. She thought the same thing herself. But the alliance with Earth was necessary. The humans had resources her empire needed, and they needed protection from the more aggressive species in the galaxy. A marriage would seal the treaty stronger than any contract. The ceremonial drums began their deep rhythm. The crowd turned toward the entrance where the human delegation stood. Zaraketh kept her face neutral as she looked at her future husband for the first time in person. She had only seen pictures before. Daniel Wright walked into the hall with steady steps. It was average height for a human, maybe 5'10". He wore simple formal clothes in dark blue, nothing like the decorated armor the Vraxian warriors favored. His brown hair was neatly combed, and his gray eyes took in the room with quiet observation. He looked like a scholar, maybe a teacher. Not a warrior, not a leader. "That is the human?" Lord Vextar said loud enough for many to hear. His forked tongue flickered with laughter. "He looks like he would break in a strong wind." Other nobles joined in the cruel humor. They made no effort to hide their words. In Vraxian culture, if you could not defend yourself with strength, you deserved mockery, Daniel heard them. Zaraketh saw his eyes shift toward the speakers, but his expression did not change. He simply continued walking toward the ceremonial platform where she waited. He did not look angry or embarrassed. He looked calm. An elderly Vraxian priest began the ceremony. He spoke the ancient words that had joined royal couples for thousands of years. The ritual was long and complex, full of references to battle and conquest. Zaraketh had always imagined this ceremony would be with a powerful Vraxian warrior, someone who matched her strength. Instead, she stood next to this quiet human who barely reached her shoulder. When it came time for the exchange of vows, Daniel spoke in perfect Vraxian. His accent was flawless. "I, Daniel Wright of Earth, pledge myself to Queen Zaraketh and the Vraxian people. I will honor our alliance and work for the prosperity of both our civilizations." Zaraketh felt a small surprise. Learning Vraxian was extremely difficult for non-native speakers. The language required vocal techniques that human throats were not designed for. Yet he spoke it like he had studied for years. She gave her own vow in English, which she had learned through neural programming. It felt strange in her mouth, but she spoke clearly. "I, Queen Zaraketh of the Vraxian Empire, accept Daniel Wright as my consort. Our union will bring strength to our peoples." The priest declared. Them joined. There was polite applause from the diplomatic guests. The Vraxian nobles clapped slowly, their faces showing barely hidden disappointment. The reception feast began immediately after. Long tables filled with food from a dozen worlds lined the walls. Zaraketh sat on her throne at the head table. Daniel sat in a smaller chair beside her. She noticed he did not eat much. He mostly observed the crowd, occasionally making notes on a small device. "You are writing during your own wedding feast?" she asked him in English. It seemed less formal than speaking Vraxian. Daniel looked up and smiled slightly. It was a gentle expression, not the fierce grin of a Vraxian warrior. "I am recording observations about the ceremony. The cultural significance is fascinating. Your people use the metaphor of battle in places where humans would use metaphors of unity or growth. It shows a lot about Vraxian values." "You study cultures?" she asked. "I was Earth's cultural ambassador before this assignment," he said. "I have spent 15 years learning about the species we have encountered since joining the galactic community." "You are a scholar, then," she said. It was not really a question. "Among other things," he replied. Before she could ask what he meant, Lord Vextar approached their table. He carried a large cup of Vraxian battle wine, a drink so strong it could intoxicate a human from the smell alone. "A toast to the new prince consort," Vextar said with false cheer. "Let us see if human bodies can handle true Vraxian celebration." He slammed the cup down in front of Daniel. Around them, nobles turned to watch. This was a test. Vraxian battle wine was a challenge even for their own warriors. A human attempting it would likely become violently ill. Zaraketh prepared to intervene. This was unnecessarily cruel. But Daniel picked up the cup without hesitation. To new friendships between our peoples, he said simply. Then he drank, not a small sip. He drank half the cup in one steady motion. Then he set it down and met Vextar's eyes with that same calm expression. Interesting flavor, Daniel said. The fermentation process must take years. I can taste at least 4 different grain sources. Vextar's face showed shock. The nobles around them went quiet. No human should have been able to drink that much battle wine without immediate effect. You have a strong constitution for a human, Vextar finally said. I have trained my body to handle many things, Daniel replied. It is useful in my work. The Lord walked away, looking confused. Zaraketh studied her new husband with new interest. There was something more here than she'd initially seen. The feast continued for hours. Zaraketh watched as Daniel spoke with various nobles and diplomats. He conversed in multiple languages, switching between them smoothly. He asked thoughtful questions about Varaxian history and culture. He never bragged or tried to impress anyone. He simply listened and learned. When a young Varaxian servant accidentally spilled wine near the head table, one of the noble guests raised his hand to strike the child. Daniel moved faster than Zaraketh expected. He caught the noble's wrist gently but firmly. Accidents happen, Daniel said in Varaxian. The child meant no harm. The noble jerked his hand away, looking embarrassed that a human had touched him. But he did not strike the servant. The child ran away quickly. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had drunk themselves into celebration stupor, Zaraketh and Daniel finally had a moment of privacy. They walked together through the palace gardens under 3 moons. You are not what I expected, she admitted. Few people are, Daniel said. If we only see what we expect to see, we miss the truth. My people think you are weak, she said bluntly. I know, he replied without offense. Do you think I am weak? Zaraketh considered the question. I think I do not know enough yet to judge. Daniel smiled at that. That is a wise answer. Perhaps we will both learn things that surprise us. The first weeks of marriage passed quietly. Daniel moved into the royal quarters of the palace, though he and Zaraketh maintained separate sleeping chambers. The arrangement was purely political, and both understood this. Still, they shared meals together and attended official functions as a united front. Daniel spent his mornings in the vast imperial library. The ancient building held records from thousands of years of Varaxian history. He would disappear among the tall shelves for hours, returning with books written in languages most modern Varaxians had forgotten. The palace staff found him unusual. Most royal consorts demanded service and attention. Daniel did the opposite. He learned their names, asked about their families, and often helped them with small tasks. When he found a servant struggling to carry heavy containers, he picked up half the load himself. You should not do such work, honored consort, the servant said nervously. It is beneath your station. No honest work is beneath anyone, Daniel replied. Besides, you are carrying too much for one person. Word of such behavior spread through the palace. The servants began to view him differently. He was strange for a royal, but kind. They appreciated his respect. Zaraketh noticed these changes. She watched from a distance as Daniel navigated palace life in his own way.
He never demanded anything? He never raised his voice?
Yet somehow people responded to him with genuine warmth rather than fear. One afternoon, she found him in the garden speaking with the head gardener in fluent Varaxian. They were discussing the care of a rare plant species that only grew on the northern continents. Daniel took notes while the old gardener explained the complex relationship between the plant and certain underground fungi. You truly find this interesting? Zaraketh asked after the gardener left. Everything is interesting if you look closely enough, Daniel said. This plant has a symbiotic relationship with 3 different organisms. Each one supports the others. It is a perfect example of how cooperation creates strength. Varaxians believe strength comes from individual power, she said. I know, he replied. But look at this plant. Alone, each organism would die. Together they create something beautiful and resilient. Is that not also a kind of strength? Zaraketh had no answer for that. She left him to his studies, but his words stayed in her mind. 2 months into the marriage, the imperial palace hosted a major diplomatic reception. Representatives from 20 different species gathered to discuss trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Zaraketh wore her formal armor, a magnificent suit of decorated metal that showed her status as a warrior queen. Daniel wore simple formal clothes again, staying close to her side during the opening ceremonies. She noticed how he observed everything, missing nothing. His eyes tracked the room constantly, noting who spoke to whom, which delegates avoided each other, Which groups form natural alliances? You are analyzing them, she said quietly in English. Always, he admitted. Understanding social dynamics helps prevent conflicts before they start. The reception proceeded smoothly at first. Then a group of Korthian delegates arrived late. The Korthians were an aggressive species with a culture even more violent than the Vraxians. They wore weapons openly and showed respect only to those who could defeat them in combat. The lead Korthian delegate, a massive creature named Grakthor, made his way directly to Zaraketh. He ignored all diplomatic protocol, pushing smaller delegates aside. Queen Zaraketh, he said in the common galactic language, I challenge your claim to the disputed mining rights in the Helion system. The Korthian Empire is stronger and deserves those resources. The room went silent. This was a direct insult. In situations like this, Vraxian honor demanded either combat or absolute submission. Zaraketh felt her battle instincts rise. Her hand moved toward her ceremonial blade, but before she could respond, Daniel stepped forward. Ambassador Grakthor, he said calmly, I am Daniel Wright, representing Earth and acting as cultural liaison for this reception. Perhaps we should discuss this matter in a more appropriate setting. Grakthor turned his attention to Daniel. The Korthian stood over 8 feet tall, covered in thick armored skin. He looked at Daniel the way a predator looks at prey. A human speaks to me? Grakthor laughed. Your species is barely worth noticing. Step aside before I move you aside. I would prefer to avoid any confrontation, Daniel said. His voice remained steady. However, I notice you brought 43 armed guards to a diplomatic reception. The agreement stated no more than 10 guards per delegation. This violation of protocol must be addressed before we can discuss resource disputes. Grakthor's face darkened with anger. You dare question me? I question the violation of agreed rules, Daniel said, just as you question the mining rights. Both are valid concerns that deserve proper discussion, not threats. The Korthian took a threatening step forward. Every guard in the room tensed. Zaraketh prepared to intervene, but Daniel did not move back. He did not show fear. He simply stood there, meeting the massive alien's eyes with that same calm expression. You have courage for such a small creature, Grakthor said, but courage without strength is meaningless. Then let me demonstrate another kind of strength, Daniel said. He switched to speaking Korthian, a language few outsiders ever learned. You bring extra guards because 3 of your rival clans sent assassins to this sector. You fear attack while away from your home territory. You challenge the Queen not because you truly want the mining rights, but because you need to show strength to your own people. You are playing a role just as we all are. Grakthor went completely still. Around them, the other Korthian guards shifted uncomfortably. No one expected a human to speak their language, much less know their internal political situation. How do you know this? Grakthor asked in Korthian. I study cultures, Daniel replied in the same language. I understand that sometimes leaders must appear aggressive to maintain power, even when they would prefer peace. So let me offer you something. We can arrange a private meeting tomorrow. You and Queen Zaraketh can discuss the mining rights properly. You can leave this meeting with dignity intact, and we can avoid a pointless conflict that helps no one. The room held its breath. Zaraketh watched in amazement as her quiet husband negotiated with one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Grakthor considered for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Tomorrow, private meeting. We will discuss this properly. Excellent, Daniel said, switching back to the common language. I will arrange everything. Please, enjoy the reception. The food is quite remarkable. The Korthian delegation moved away. The tension in the room eased. Conversations resumed, though many eyes now watched Daniel with new interest. Zaraketh pulled Daniel aside as soon as she could. You speak Korthian. And you know their political situation? I speak 17 languages, he said simply. And yes, I make it my business to understand political situations. It helps with negotiation. You could have been killed, she said. No, Daniel replied. Grakthor needed a way out of the confrontation he started. I gave him 1 month. He will respect that more than if I had challenged him to combat. That is not how Vraxians would handle it, she said. I know, Daniel said, but I am not Vraxian. I have my own methods. That night, Zaraketh lay awake thinking about what she had witnessed. Daniel had faced down a Korthian warrior without weapons, without threats, without violence. He had used knowledge and understanding as his tools, and it had worked. Perhaps, she thought, there was more than one kind of strength after all. The warning came in the middle of the night. Zaraketh woke to the sound of alarms echoing through the palace corridors. She moved instantly, years of warrior training taking over. She grabbed her combat armor and weapons, dressing in less than a minute. Her communication device crackled with urgent messages. "Your Majesty, we have a breach in the south wing. Armed rebels. They are moving toward the throne room." Zaraketh's blood went cold. A coup. She had suspected Lord Vexstar and his faction were planning something, but she had not expected them to move so soon. "How many?" she demanded. "At least 200 soldiers. They have heavy weapons and inside knowledge of palace security. Seal the royal quarters. Protect the civilians. I am coming to engage them." She ran into the corridor, her scaled feet silent on the polished floor. Guards joined her from various posts, forming a defensive unit around their queen. They moved with practiced efficiency toward the sounds of battle. Then Zaraketh remembered. Daniel. His quarters were in the eastern section, far from her own chambers. The rebels would pass directly through that area. "Send a unit to retrieve my consort," she ordered. "Bring him to the safe room immediately." "Yes, Your Majesty." But even as she gave the order, Zaraketh felt a deep worry. Daniel was gentle and kind. He was a scholar and a diplomat. If armed rebels found him, he would have no way to defend himself. The thought of him being captured or killed made her feel something unexpected. Fear. Not for herself, but for him. She pushed the feeling aside. She had a battle to fight. Zaraketh and her guards reached the main corridor where the rebels had gathered. Lord Vexstar stood at their center, wearing combat armor and holding a plasma rifle.
His eyes glowed with ambition.
"Your reign ends tonight, Zaraketh," he called out. "You have made our empire weak with your alliance to humans. We will restore Vraxian strength." "You are a traitor and a coward," she replied. "Face me in single combat if you truly believe you are stronger." "I am not foolish enough to fight you alone," Vexstar said. "I fight smart."
I fight to win.
The battle began. Plasma fire lit up the corridor. Zaraketh moved like lightning, her blade cutting through enemy weapons and armor. Her guards fought with fierce loyalty, holding the line against superior numbers. But the rebels kept coming, pushing them back step by step. Meanwhile, in the eastern wing of the palace, Daniel heard the alarms. He knew immediately what they meant. The political tensions he had observed over the past months had finally erupted into violence. He moved to his door and found it sealed from the outside. Security protocol. The palace systems were trying to protect him by locking down all non-essential areas. But Daniel knew palace blueprints better than the security systems did. He had spent weeks in the library studying the building's history and structure. He went to his wall panel and entered a maintenance code he had memorized. The door opened. The corridor outside was chaos. Palace staff ran in panic. Somewhere nearby, he heard the sound of weapons fire and screaming. Then he heard something that made his heart stop. Children crying. Daniel ran toward the sound. He found a group of young Vraxians huddled in a recreation room. They were offspring of palace workers, left behind when the adults evacuated. An elderly servant named Kira tried to comfort them, but her own fear was obvious. "Daniel," she said with relief when she saw him. "Thank the ancestors. We are trapped. The rebels are between us and the safe rooms." Daniel counted quickly. 12 children and 1 elderly caretaker. He heard heavy footsteps approaching from the main corridor. The rebels were sweeping through this section. "Follow me," he said. "Stay quiet and stay close." "Where are we going?" Kira asked. "There is an old service passage behind the east wall. It was used by servants centuries ago. Most people have forgotten it exists." He led them to what looked like a solid wall. His fingers found the hidden panel he had discovered during his research. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. "Inside! Quickly!" he said. They filed in just as rebel soldiers rounded the corner. Daniel was the last to enter. He closed the panel and heard the rebels search the room they had just left. "Clear," one soldier called out. "Move to the next section." In the darkness of the passage, Daniel activated a small light. The children looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. He knelt down to their level. "I need everyone to be very brave," he said softly in Vraxian. "We are going to play a quiet game. Who can move the most silently? No talking, no crying." "Can you do that?" The children nodded. Even in their fear, they responded to his calm confidence. They began moving through the passage. It was dusty and dark, unused for generations. Daniel led them carefully, his mind working through the palace layout. The passage would take them close to the diplomatic wing, which had its own security systems. Behind them he heard sounds of the rebels getting closer. They had found the hidden panel. "Someone used this passage," a voice echoed through the tunnel. "Search it. Kill anyone you find." Daniel's expression changed. The gentle scholar disappeared. His eyes grew sharp and focused. He had hoped to avoid this, but he would not let these children be harmed. "Kira," he whispered, "take the children forward. Follow this passage for exactly 200 steps. You will reach a junction. Turn left. That will bring you to the diplomatic wing.
The door opens from inside. Get them to safety."
"What about you?" she asked. "I will buy you time. Go. Now." Kira looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Daniel's voice stopped her. She had never heard him speak with such absolute authority. She gathered the children and moved forward. Daniel turned back toward the approaching soldiers. The passage was narrow, only wide enough for one person at a time. That was an advantage.
They had studied the palace structure for a reason.
Every wall, every passage, every support beam. He knew this building better than anyone. The first rebel entered the passage cautiously, weapon raised. Daniel waited in absolute stillness. Years of training came back to him. Training he had not used in a long time. Training he had hoped never to use again. When the soldier came close enough, Daniel moved. His hand struck the weapon, redirecting it. His other hand hit a precise point on the soldier's neck. The rebel dropped without making a sound. Daniel caught him and lowered him quietly to the ground. The second soldier saw his partner fall and raised an alarm. But in the narrow passage, numbers meant nothing. They could only come at him one at a time. Daniel used everything around him. He knew which walls were solid stone and which were thin panels. He knew where support beams were weakest. He fought with efficiency, not rage. Each movement had a purpose. Each strike was precise. He hit a wall panel that collapsed a section of ceiling behind him, blocking pursuit. He triggered an ancient water system that flooded part of the passage. He used the darkness, the confined space. Every advantage the environment offered. The rebels realized too late that they were not fighting a helpless scholar. They were fighting someone who understood tactical advantage, who knew the terrain perfectly, who fought with cold calculation. By the time Zarakath fought her way to the eastern wing, the coup was failing. Her forces had pushed back the main rebel army. Vexstar had fled. She searched desperately for Daniel, fearing the worst. She found him in the diplomatic wing, surrounded by 12 children and one grateful servant. He was dirty and breathing hard, but alive. His clothes were torn. His hands showed signs of combat. Behind him, the passage was blocked with debris and unconscious rebel soldiers. Their eyes met across the room. Zarakath saw something in his expression she had never seen before. The gentleness was still there, but beneath it was something else. Something strong and unyielding. Something that had protected these children against trained killers. "You are safe," he said simply. "What did you do?" she asked. "What was necessary," he replied. "The palace took 3 days to secure completely." Rebel forces scattered when news spread that Lord Vexstar had fled the capital. Many surrendered once they realized the coup had failed. Loyal guards hunted down those who refused to give up. Zarakath spent those days managing the crisis. She interrogated prisoners, reorganized her security forces, and sent messages to the outer territories confirming her continued rule. She worked without rest, as a warrior queen should. But her mind kept returning to one image. Daniel standing calmly among rescued children, his hands showing clear signs of combat. The blocked passage behind him told a story she needed to understand. On the 4th day after the coup, she finally had time to speak with him privately. She found Daniel in the gardens tending to plants that had been damaged during the fighting. He worked quietly, replanting flowers that had been trampled. "We need to talk," she said. Daniel looked up and nodded. He brushed dirt from his hands and stood. "I wondered when you would ask." They walked together through the garden paths, away from any listening guards or servants. For a while neither spoke. Zarakath organized her thoughts, choosing words carefully. "The soldiers you stopped in the service passage," she began.
The guards reviewed the scene. 17 rebels were found unconscious.
3 sections of passage were collapsed strategically to block pursuit. The tactical efficiency was remarkable. "I protected the children," Daniel said simply. "You did more than that," Zarakath replied. "You fought trained soldiers in conditions that should have favored them. You won." The guards who examined the scene said whoever did this had extensive combat training and tactical knowledge. Daniel stopped walking. He looked at her with those calm gray eyes. "What do you want to know?" "Who are you really?" she asked. Not the gentle scholar who reads in libraries. Not the quiet diplomat who drinks tea with servants. Who are you when the masks come off? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat on a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. Zaraketh sat beside him, waiting. Before I became a cultural ambassador, I worked for Earth's Crisis Response Unit, he said. We handled situations that were too delicate for military intervention but too dangerous for normal diplomacy. Hostage situations, terrorist threats, political kidnappings. Be so happy situations where one wrong move could cost lives. You were a soldier, Zaraketh said. Not exactly. I was a tactical analyst and negotiator. My job was to understand people, predict their actions, and find peaceful solutions. But I was also trained to handle situations when peace failed. I learned to fight, to use environments as weapons, to protect people when talking was no longer enough. Why did you stop? She asked. Daniel's expression grew distant. 5 years ago, I led a negotiation with a radical group holding 30 children hostage. I spent 18 hours talking to their leader, building trust, finding common ground. I thought I had succeeded. Then someone on our team made a mistake, tried to force entry too early. The situation collapsed. He paused, and Zaraketh saw real pain in his eyes. I managed to save 27 of the children, he continued. But 3 died. 3 children who would still be alive if I had been better, faster, smarter. After that, I could not continue. I resigned and requested transfer to cultural studies. I decided that if I understood people better, truly understood their cultures and motivations, I could prevent crises before they started. So you became a scholar, Zaraketh said. I became someone who chooses peace first, Daniel replied. Someone who uses knowledge instead of force. Someone who believes that understanding prevents more conflicts than weapons ever could. But you can still fight when necessary, she said. Yes, he admitted. I choose not to. There is a difference. Choosing peace when you are capable of violence is not weakness. It is control. It is deciding what kind of person you want to be. Zaraketh absorbed this. In Vraxian culture, warriors who could fight always did. Strength was meant to be displayed constantly. The idea of hiding power, of choosing gentleness when you were capable of violence, was foreign to her. You let my nobles mock you, she said. You let them think you were weak. Why? Because I wanted to see who they really were, Daniel said. When people think you are no threat, they reveal their true nature. Lord Vextar showed his ambition immediately. Others showed cruelty or kindness. I learned more in those first weeks than I could have learned in months of formal meetings. You were gathering intelligence, Zaraketh realized. I was understanding the situation, he corrected gently. Knowledge is protection, not just for me, but for everyone. They sat in silence for a while. Zaraketh thought about everything she had believed about strength and power. Her whole life she had been taught that showing dominance was essential, that any sign of gentleness was weakness, that warriors must always prove their might. I envy you, she said quietly. Daniel looked surprised. Envy me? Why you choose when to show your strength, she said. I was raised to believe I must always show mine. From the day I could walk, I was trained to fight. Every challenge had to be met with aggression. Every insult required a response. I have never been allowed to be gentle without being seen as weak. That sounds exhausting, Daniel said. It is, she admitted. It was the first time she'd ever said this out loud. Sometimes I watch you with the servants, speaking kindly, helping with small tasks. I see how they respond to you with genuine warmth. My people respect me because they fear me. It is not the same. Respect built on fear is unstable. It only lasts as long as the fear does. Respect built on genuine care is much stronger. But how do I change? Zaraketh asked. My entire empire is built on the culture of strength through domination. If I suddenly start acting differently, they will see it as weakness. You do not change everything at once, Daniel said. You change small things. You ask questions instead of giving orders sometimes? You listen to advice instead of only commanding? You show that strength can include wisdom, not just combat skill. Will you help me, she asked. The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Help you how? Daniel asked. Teach me what you know about people, about understanding instead of just conquering, about choosing when to fight and when to talk. She paused. I want to learn to be strong in the way you are strong. Daniel smiled, a genuine, warm expression. I will help you, but you must also teach me. Teach you what? She asked. Your people have survived for thousands of years. Your warrior culture has protected your civilization through countless threats. There is wisdom in that too. I can learn from your directness, your courage, your refusal to hide from challenges. We can teach each other." Zaraketh felt something shift inside her. For the first time since childhood, she felt like she did not have to carry everything alone. The strange human who everyone had mocked as weak was offering her a kind of partnership she had never imagined. "When do we start?" she asked. "Now, if you want," Daniel said. "Tell me about your childhood. What made you want to become a warrior?" And Zaraketh did something she had not done in years. She talked about herself not as a queen, but as a person. She told Daniel about the pressure of royal expectations, the weight of always having to be perfect, the loneliness of power. He listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions, helping her see her own experiences from new angles. Later that evening, they trained together in the palace combat arena. Zaraketh showed Daniel advanced Raxian fighting techniques. He showed her human martial arts that focused on using an opponent's strength against them. "You move differently than I expected," she said after a practice bout. "You fight like water, flowing around obstacles. And you fight like lightning," he replied. "Direct and overwhelming. Both have value." They continued training, two very different people learning to understand each other. The palace staff who watched whispered among themselves. The queen was laughing during combat practice. The quiet human consort was holding his own against a warrior queen. Something was changing in the palace, and no one was quite sure what it meant. But Zaraketh knew. For the first time in her life, she had found not just a political ally, but a true partner. Someone who saw strength in gentleness and gentleness in strength. Someone who understood that power came in many forms. And perhaps most importantly, someone who helped her see that she did not have to choose between being strong and being kind. She could be both. 6 months after the failed coup, the Galactic Council issued an emergency summons. A new threat had emerged in the Outer Territories. The Zalkarian Dominion, a militaristic empire known for brutal conquest, had begun attacking civilian colonies across multiple systems. 12 different civilizations had already fallen to their advance. The council meeting took place on the neutral station Concordia Prime. Representatives from 40 species gathered in the massive assembly hall. Tension filled the air. Everyone knew what this meeting meant. War was coming. Zaraketh attended with Daniel at her side. She wore her ceremonial armor, polished to mirror brightness. Daniel wore formal diplomatic robes in deep blue. They entered together, and Zaraketh noticed something different in how others looked at them. News of the coup and its resolution had spread throughout the galaxy. People no longer saw Daniel as just a weak human consort. The council chairman, a tall crystalline being named Selector Kryn, called the assembly to order. The Zalkarian threat grows daily. They have superior weapons and show no interest in negotiation. We must respond with force. The question is how to organize our military response. Arguments erupted immediately. The Korthians wanted to attack head-on with overwhelming military might. The Delphian Collective suggested building defensive fortifications and waiting for the enemy to exhaust themselves. The Meridian Alliance proposed abandoning the outer colonies and protecting only the core worlds. Each species argued for their own strategic preference. No one could agree. Hours passed with no progress. Zaraketh watched as the council descended into chaos. Finally she stood. The assembly quieted. When the Vraxian queen spoke, people listened. "We are failing before we even begin," she said. "Each of us argues from our own cultural perspective. The Korthians see only direct confrontation because that is their way. The Delphians see only defense because they value preservation. We will never agree if we only argue from our own viewpoints." "What do you suggest, Queen Zaraketh?" Selector Kryn asked. "I suggest we listen to someone who understands all our perspectives," she said. She gestured to Daniel. "My consort has studied every culture in this chamber. He sees connections we miss. I propose we hear his analysis." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Many still doubted human capabilities, but the chairman nodded. "The council recognizes Daniel Wright of Earth." Daniel stood and moved to the central platform. He looked calm, despite hundreds of eyes watching him. He activated a holographic display showing the Zalkarian advance patterns. "The Zalkarians are not just attacking randomly," he began. "Look at the pattern. They target colonies with specific resources. Mining operations, agricultural centers, manufacturing hubs. They are building a supply chain, not just conquering territory." He zoomed in on specific systems. They attack with overwhelming force to terrify others into surrender. But analysis of their fleet movement shows something interesting. After each conquest, they leave minimal occupation forces and move quickly to the next target. They are stretched thin. So we should attack their supply lines, the Korthian ambassador said eagerly. No, Daniel replied. That is what they expect. Military species always think in terms of direct confrontation, but the Zalkarians have studied galactic culture. They know how we think. They are prepared for military response. Then what do you propose? Asked the Delphian representative. I propose we do what they do not expect, Daniel said. We talk to them. The chamber erupted in protests. The Zalkarians refuse all communication, someone shouted. They destroy anyone who approaches peacefully. Daniel waited for silence. They refuse communication from military powers. But what if the message came from someone they do not see as a threat? What if we approach them not with threats, but with understanding of what they truly need? Zaraketh stood beside him. My consort and I have developed a strategy that combines Vaxian strength with human diplomacy. We propose a two-part approach. First, we establish a strong defensive perimeter that stops their advance but does not threaten their conquered territories. We show strength without aggression. Second, Daniel continued, we open communication channels through neutral parties. We offer them what they actually need: resources, trade agreements, recognition. We give them a path to get what they want without continued warfare. And if they refuse, the Korthian ambassador demanded, then we have the military coalition ready, Zaraketh said, but positioned defensively. We make clear that further advance is impossible, while leaving them room to negotiate. We remove their ability to win through force, but offer them the ability to win through peace. Daniel brought up more data. I have analyzed Zalkarian culture extensively. They value strength and honor, similar to Varaxians and Korthians. But they also value pragmatism. If we show them that negotiation offers better results than warfare, and if we approach them with respect rather than fear, there is a possibility of resolution. The council debated for hours. Some species remained skeptical. Others saw merit in the approach. Finally, Selector Kryn called for a vote. The proposal passed by a narrow margin. They would try the combined strategy. Over the next weeks, Zaraketh and Daniel worked together to implement their plan. Vraxian forces led the military coalition, establishing defensive positions that halted Zalkarian advance without provoking major battles. Other species contributed ships and resources. The defensive line held firm. Meanwhile, Daniel opened communication channels through smaller neutral species. He sent carefully crafted messages in the Zalkarian language, which he had learned during the debate preparation. The messages acknowledged Zalkarian strength, respected their culture, and offered alternatives to continued conflict. At first there was no response. Then, after 3 weeks, a Zalkarian commander agreed to a meeting. Daniel and Zaraketh traveled to a neutral station with minimal security. The Zalkarians came in force, testing their resolve. The negotiation lasted 2 full days. Daniel spoke with the Zalkarian leadership, learning about their civilization's history. They had been driven from their homeworld by environmental collapse. They needed resources desperately to save their people. Conquest seemed like their only option. Zaraketh contributed by speaking as one warrior culture to another. She acknowledged Zalkarian military prowess while making clear that the Galactic Coalition would not allow further expansion. She offered respect without submission. Together, they crafted an agreement. The Zalkarians would keep the territories they had already conquered, but would stop further expansion. In exchange, the Galactic Council would recognize their sovereignty and establish trade agreements that gave them access to needed resources. The conquered colonies would receive compensation and gradual autonomy under Zalkarian administration. It was not a perfect solution. Some species objected to allowing the Zalkarians to keep conquered territory, but it stopped the war. It prevented thousands of deaths, and it established a framework for future cooperation. When Zaraketh and Daniel returned to Concordia Prime, the atmosphere had changed completely. Species that had doubted them now showed respect. The council chairman personally thanked them for their service. You have shown us something important, Selector Kryn said. Different kinds of strength working together create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. News of the successful negotiation spread across the galaxy. Other species began requesting similar combined approaches to their own conflicts. The Vraxian Empire saw a shift in how others perceived them. They were still known as warriors, but now also as wise leaders willing to seek peaceful solutions. Back on the Vraxian homeworld, Zaraketh addressed her people from the palace balcony. Thousands gathered to hear her speak. Daniel stood beside her, no longer hidden in the background. Our empire has always valued strength, she told the crowd. We have survived through courage and martial skill. These values will always be part of who we are. But I've learned that true strength includes wisdom. True power includes the ability to choose peace when peace serves our interests better than war. She gestured to Daniel. Some of you questioned my alliance with Earth. You saw humans as weak, but this man taught me that strength comes in many forms. He protected our children during the coup using knowledge and tactical skill. He helped end a galactic war through understanding and diplomacy. He showed me that choosing gentleness when you are capable of violence is not weakness. It is wisdom. The crowd listened in silence. This was not the kind of speech they expected from their warrior queen. I do not ask you to abandon our warrior traditions, Zaraketh continued. I ask you to expand them, to see that a warrior who knows when not to fight is stronger than one who only knows combat, to understand that protecting our people sometimes means building bridges instead of breaking enemies. She paused, then added with pride, My consort and I will continue to serve you with both strength and wisdom. We will face challenges as partners, combining the best of both our worlds. That evening, Zaraketh and Daniel walked through the palace gardens again, the same place where they had first truly talked months ago. So much had changed since then. The nobles no longer mock you, Zaraketh observed. I noticed, Daniel said with a slight smile. Though I think some miss the entertainment. Do you regret it, she asked. The marriage? Being here? Daniel thought carefully. When I first agreed to this, it was duty, a political necessity. I expected to spend my time studying culture and staying out of the way. And now, she asked, now I have a partner, he said. Someone who challenges me to be better. Someone who values both strength and kindness. Someone who is willing to change and grow. He looked at her directly. No, I do not regret it. Do you? Zaraketh smiled, a genuine expression that few ever saw. I thought I was accepting a weak consort to secure an alliance. Instead, I found someone who showed me what real strength looks like. Someone who made me a better leader and a better person. She took his hand, a gesture of affection unusual for Vraxians. Thank you for not being what I expected. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Thank you for looking past your expectations, Daniel replied. And for teaching me that courage and compassion can exist together. They stood together as 3 moons rose over the palace. 2 people from different worlds who had found unexpected partnership. The galaxy was changing, becoming more complex and more connected. And at the center of that change stood a warrior queen and a gentle diplomat, proving that the strongest alliances were built not on similarity, but on respect for differences. The future would bring new challenges. But they would face them together, combining strength with wisdom, courage with understanding, proving that true power came not from domination, but from partnership,